In the outer darkness of the Thrissian Assembly's frontier sector, the stars moved slowly like ancient witnesses that had grown bored of war. War, after all, was common. Civilizations rose. They declared themselves eternal. They fielded fleets that gleamed with the arrogance of technological perfection. Then they collapsed beneath the gravity of their own pride. The galaxy had watched it happen 1,000 times. So when the new species arrived, late, quiet, and poorly armed, the galaxy barely noticed. Inside the observation chamber of the Orbital Council Spire, Archivist Velkar Ithrin adjusted the spectral filters of the long-range viewing array. His elongated fingers tapped the crystal console with mild disinterest. "Species designation?" he asked. A junior analyst replied without looking up. "Sol system. Third planet. Self-designation. Humanity." Velkar's crest ridges lowered slightly in skepticism. Humans. The word carried no reputation yet. No conquests. No legendary fleets. No ancient ruins suggesting lost galactic empires. Just another young species stepping timidly into the endless cold. "Display their fleet composition," Velkar said. The projection shifted. 7 ships appeared. 7. For a moment, the chamber remained silent. Then a few analysts let out low, amused clicks of laughter. Even the smallest regional powers fielded hundreds. The holographic ships rotated slowly in the air. Angular. Functional. Unimpressive. Velkar leaned forward. Mass? Approximately 12 million tons for the largest vessel. Another pause. One of the military observers snorted. "That's barely a cruiser." Velkar studied the ships longer than the others. Young civilizations were predictable. They arrived hopeful, nervous, eager to prove themselves. Usually they brought a fleet that tried far too hard to look powerful. The humans had done the opposite. No glowing weapon spines, no aggressive wing structures, no ceremonial architecture, just quiet gray hulls, like tools. Velkar frowned. Armaments? The analyst read from the scan. Rail-based projectile weapons, limited energy arrays. Defensive shielding rated moderate. Another observer waved a dismissive hand. Primitive. Indeed, someone added. Velkar remained quiet. The hologram zoomed in on the lead vessel. A blunt, wedge-shaped craft with thick armor plating and long spinal rails. No decorative elements, no intimidation. It looked almost industrial, like something designed by engineers who expected it to get dirty. Velkar tapped the console again. Designation of the flagship? The analyst hesitated. Human translation is TNS resolve. Military registry? Unclear. Humans appear to classify ships using several parallel systems. That drew a ripple of quiet irritation from the chamber. Disorganized military doctrine was common among young species. It usually meant they hadn't survived a real war yet. Velkar leaned back. Purpose of fleet deployment? Another analyst brought up a diplomatic transmission. Humanity has requested provisional membership in the Galactic Accord. Standard evaluation procedure required. They have been asked to demonstrate fleet capabilities. Someone in the chamber chuckled. 7 ships. Perhaps they misunderstood the request. Velkar studied the fleet again. There was something about their formation. Tight, precise, not ceremonial. Every vessel sat exactly where it needed to be to protect the others. The formation looked practiced, not impressive, but practiced. He dismissed the thought. Begin the evaluation. Across the observation chamber, the massive viewport revealed the empty void where the demonstration would occur. The Galactic Accord evaluation was not combat. It was merely a display of technology and fleet coordination. A polite way to measure whether a species was competent enough to join galactic society. Usually the candidates arrived with excessive theatrics. Weapons tests. Shield demonstrations. Overly dramatic warp maneuvers. The humans had done none of that. Their fleet had arrived 2 hours early, and simply waited. Velkar found that, Strange. They are holding position, an analyst reported. Yes, Velkar replied. I can see that. 7 ships hung motionless in space. No patrols, no fighter screens, no rotating shield harmonics, just stillness. The military observer beside Velkar spoke. They look like cargo vessels. Several others murmured agreement. Velkar zoomed in again. The hulls bore markings, white letters along the sides. Human language. He translated one automatically. United Earth Defense Fleet. The name felt almost quaint. Why do they call it defense? Someone asked. Velkar answered absent-mindedly. Because young species believe war comes to them. A few analysts chuckled. Old civilizations knew better. War was something you brought to others. The chamber lights dimmed as the evaluation drones launched. Automated targets scattered across the testing zone. Humans will demonstrate weapons accuracy first, the analyst announced. Velkar expected sloppy firing patterns. Most new civilizations relied heavily on energy weapons that required decades of refinement to become effective. The human flagship moved slightly, barely noticeable. A long rail cannon aligned along its spine. Velkar blinked. No charge cycle? Projectile weapon, the analyst reminded him. A moment later, Thum. The sound didn't travel through vacuum, but the rail discharge created a visible distortion through the sensors. One of the drones vanished. Not exploded, vanished. Its fragments passed the sensors milliseconds later. Velkar leaned forward. Velocity? The analyst's voice sharpened. 30 kilometers per second. The room quieted. That was higher than expected. Second shot, someone said. Thum. Another drone disintegrated. Then another. Then another. 7 shots. 7 kills. Each one precise to within centimeters. Velkar's crest lifted slightly. That level of targeting accuracy was unusual. The military observer beside him grunted. Good gunnery, still primitive. Velkar nodded. But something about the rhythm bothered him. The human ships weren't celebrating. No formation change, no signal bursts. They simply returned to stillness. Like the demonstration had been routine. Like they had done this 1,000 times. 2 hours later, the evaluation was nearly complete. Human shield systems, adequate. Propulsion, respectable. Weapons, competent but unspectacular. Nothing revolutionary. Nothing terrifying. The chamber began preparing the final assessment. Recommendation? The council official asked. Velkar glanced at the report. Humans possess moderate defensive capability, limited strategic threat. The military observer nodded. Agreed. Another official added. They will likely become a minor regional member species. Velkar began recording the official conclusion. Then an alarm tone cut through the chamber. Sharp, urgent. Every analyst turned toward the sensor board. What is that? Velkar asked. The junior analyst's voice trembled slightly. New contact detected. Where? Within the human formation. Velkar frowned. That's impossible. The sensors recalibrated. A massive gravitational shadow appeared on the tactical display, not approaching, not warping in, already there, hidden. Velkar's crest flattened. How long has that object been present? The analyst swallowed. Since the humans arrived. The room fell silent, the projection magnified. Behind the 7 small human ships, something vast began to shift. Not a cruiser, not a battleship, something much larger. Something that had remained invisible to every galactic sensor for hours. The smaller ships slowly moved aside, like escorts clearing a path, and the darkness behind them unfolded. Velkar felt a cold sensation ripple through his spine. Mass reading? The answer came back in a whisper. 180 million tons. Someone in the chamber breathed the word that no one wanted to say. Dreadnought. Velkar stared at the growing silhouette. The humans had not arrived with 7 ships. They had arrived with 8. and the largest one had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. The human transmission channel activated. A calm voice spoke across every frequency. "Apologies for the delay. Galactic Accord, a pause." Then, "Earth's Ort fleet has completed its demonstration." Velkar felt the room freeze around him. "Escort fleet?" The voice continued. "We will now present our primary deterrence vessel." Outside the viewport, a massive hidden warship finished unfolding its stealth plating. And for the first time, the galaxy saw the name carved across its armored hull. TN Aegis Eternal. Velkar suddenly realized something that made his blood run cold. The 7 ships had never been the fleet. They had been guards, and the ship behind them was something far worse. The human voice spoke again. "Shall we begin the real demonstration?" The first thing the galaxy noticed about the human dreadnought was not its weapons. It was its silence. The warship hung in the blackness behind the 7 escort vessels, like a mountain that had suddenly decided to exist. No weapon ports opened. No shield flare shimmered around it. No intimidating broadcast announced its power. It simply remained. Inside the Thrissian Assembly orbital spire, the observation chamber had fallen completely silent. Archivist Velkar Ithrin stared at the sensor projections. The dreadnought's hull length was nearly 9 kilometers. 9. That was not a ship designed for patrol. It was not even designed for fleet combat. Ships that size existed for only one reason: war-ending force projection. The junior analyst spoke carefully, as if afraid the numbers themselves might trigger something dangerous. "Thermal output is minimal." Velkar frowned. "That vessel should be producing heat signatures comparable to a small star." "It isn't." Another analyst leaned closer to the readings. "Power systems are dormant." The military observer scoffed. "Impossible. A ship that size requires constant reactor output just to maintain life support." Velkar narrowed his eyes. "Unless the humans designed it to remain silent." He tapped the console. "Run a deep scan." The result disturbed everyone in the chamber. The dreadnought was layered in something unfamiliar. A complex hull architecture composed of multiple materials interwoven in geometric lattice. Energy signatures vanished against it. Radar bounced away. Gravitational scanners struggled to maintain lock. The military observer exhaled slowly. "Stealth armor," Velkar nodded. "Not just stealth." He enlarged a section of the hull. "It's absorbing sensor energy." A murmur spread through the room. Absorbing, not deflecting. That level of material engineering suggested centuries of experimentation. But humanity had only entered interstellar space 28 years ago. Velkar looked back toward the silent dreadnought. Young civilizations were supposed to struggle, to stumble through early technological phases, to build fleets through trial and catastrophic error. Humans had somehow skipped several steps. The council official cleared his throat. "Archivist Ithrin, request explanation from the human delegation." Velkar activated the communication channel. The same calm voice returned. "Human command vessel resolve receiving." Velkar chose his words carefully. "You did not declare the presence of a Dreadnought-class vessel during your arrival." The human voice responded politely. "Correct." A pause. That ship was not part of the fleet evaluation. Velkar felt irritation flicker through his mind. "Then why bring it?" The answer came without hesitation. "For safety." The chamber erupted with quiet murmurs. Safety? From what? This sector of space was protected by the Galactic Accord defense ring. No major power would attack here. Velkar leaned forward. "You believe the Accord would threaten your fleet?" "No," the human replied. "We believe the galaxy contains unknown variables." Velkar frowned. "That is a vague answer." The human voice remained calm. "It is an honest one." Velkar muted the channel. The council chamber filled with low discussions. Several officials were clearly irritated. "This is excessive. An intimidation tactic." New species often attempt theatrics. But Velkar remained quiet. Something about the situation didn't feel theatrical. It felt calculated. He opened a historical database. Display the Human Conflict Archive. The junior analyst hesitated. That database is extensive. How extensive? Approximately 12,000 recorded wars across their planetary history. The room fell silent. Most intelligent species experienced several major conflicts before achieving planetary unity. 12,000 was absurd. Velkar studied the scrolling list. Wars between nations. Wars between ideologies. Wars between empires. Wars within the same civilization. Human history appeared to be an endless sequence of violence interrupted briefly by recovery. One entry caught his attention. World War. Another. World War. Then dozens of smaller regional wars. Proxy wars. Cold wars. Economic wars. Velkar felt a strange sensation as he read further. Humanity had not avoided war. They had studied it, perfected it, analyzed every possible variation. Archivist, the military observer said quietly, "Look at this." A new file appeared. Human Military Doctrine. Velkar began reading. The language was stark, direct, cold in its logic. War is not chaos. War is mathematics. Victory belongs to those who understand escalation before their enemy does. Velkar exhaled slowly. Where did they learn this? The analyst answered. From each other. Across the chamber, another sensor alert chimed. The Dreadnought had shifted position. Not aggressively, just slightly. But the motion revealed something new along its hull. Velkar zoomed in. Rows of enormous recessed structures along the ship's spine. Weapon arrays? Someone asked. The analyst ran a scan. Unknown configuration. Velkar enlarged the image further. Each recess contained what looked like massive cylindrical chambers. Hundreds of them. What are those? The military observer whispered. The analyst hesitated. They appear to be launch tubes. Velkar's mind calculated quickly. Launch tubes that large could only house one category of weapon, strategic payload systems. Planetary bombardment platforms. Or, he felt his throat tighten. Interstellar kinetic weapons, the kind designed not to defeat fleets, but to erase civilizations. Velkar reopened the communication channel. Human command. Yes? What is the purpose of the launch systems on your Dreadnought? The response came after a brief pause. They are part of our deterrence architecture, Velkar pressed. Deterrence against whom? The human voice answered softly. Anyone who decides Earth is weak. The council official leaned toward Velkar. This is unacceptable. They are threatening the Accord. Velkar shook his head slowly. No. He stared at the silent Dreadnought again. They are not threatening us. He enlarged another part of the hull. A series of names etched into the armor plating. Thousands of them. Human words. The analyst translated a few. Cities, planets, battles, memorials. Velkar felt a strange chill. Those are not weapon designations. What are they? Someone asked. Velkar's voice grew quieter. They're remembrance markers. The human Dreadnought was not decorated with victories. It was covered in losses. Another message arrived from the human fleet. Velkar opened it. A visual feed appeared. The interior of the Dreadnought's command bridge. Human officers moved calmly between stations. No panic, no arrogance. Just quiet professionalism. At the center stood a human commander. Gray-haired, eyes steady. He spoke directly to the Accord chamber. Archivist Ithrin, members of the Assembly. Velkar blinked. How do you know my name? The human smiled faintly. You've been watching us for 6 hours. A pause. We assumed you would introduce yourself eventually. Velkar felt an uncomfortable realization. The humans had been aware of every sensor pointed at them, perhaps even from the moment they arrived. The commander continued. You believe the Dreadnought is a threat. Velkar said nothing. The human nodded slightly. That's understandable. He gestured toward the massive ship behind him. Your species evolved in relatively stable star systems. Velkar's crest lowered. Explain. The commander's expression grew thoughtful. Earth didn't. He tapped a console. The star map appeared. Human territory was located near a chaotic region of stellar debris. Rogue asteroids. Unstable gravitational fields. Velkar recognized the region immediately. The Perseus Scar, one of the most dangerous sectors in known space. Your homeworld is there? Velkar asked. Yes. Velkar felt genuine confusion. How did your species survive? The human commander looked directly into the camera. By preparing for the worst day imaginable. He paused. Every day. Another sensor alarm suddenly screamed through the chamber. This one was different. Urgent. Panicked. The junior analyst shouted. Multiple warp signatures detected. Velkar spun toward the tactical display. A dozen ships appeared. Then 24, then 50. Black, jagged warships pouring out of hyperspace. Velkar recognized the configuration instantly. His blood ran cold. Pirate armada, someone whispered. No, worse. The markings resolved. Velkar's voice dropped to a whisper. Not pirates. The symbols on the incoming fleet glowed crimson. The sigil of the Vorath Dominion, one of the most brutal war empires in the Outer Spiral. A species that conquered young civilizations for labor and genetic harvesting. And their fleet was heading directly toward the human ships. Velkar looked back at the Dreadnought. The humans had brought it for safety. Not from the Accord, from this. The Vorath fleet commander broadcast a message across open space. A guttural alien voice echoed through every channel. Unknown species. Power down your vessels. A pause. Your ships are now property of the Dominion. Inside the human bridge, the gray-haired commander didn't move. He simply sighed, then spoke quietly to his crew. Looks like we're giving the demonstration after all. Velkar felt a chill ripple through the chamber. Because the human commander didn't sound afraid. He sounded tired. The Vorath fleet accelerated. 100 warships, charging directly toward the tiny human formation. Velkar turned back to the Dreadnought. For the first time, its reactor began to wake, and the power reading climbing from that silent ship made the entire sensor array tremble. The Vorath Dominion did not slow down. They never did. Across the galaxy, the Vorath had built a reputation that was equal parts brutality and efficiency. They were conquerors not because they enjoyed war, but because they were exceptionally good at it. Their fleets moved like blades through space, fast, decisive, and merciless. When they encountered young civilizations, there was rarely a battle. There was simply acquisition. Inside the Thrissian Assembly observation chamber, Velkar Ithrin watched the tactical display with rising dread. The Vorath fleet numbered 112 warships. Heavy cruisers, carrier vessels, boarding platforms, planetary suppression barges. More than enough to dismantle the small human fleet within minutes. The Dominion commander had clearly recognized a weak target. 7 escorts and an unidentified large vessel. To a predator species like the Vorath, it looked like easy prey. The Dominion broadcast another message. Unknown vessels. You will power down your weapons and prepare for inspection. A pause. You have 1 minute. Velkar glanced at the human Dreadnought. Its reactor output continued climbing. Slowly, deliberately, like something massive stretching after a long sleep. Human command, Velkar said over the channel. You are outnumbered. The gray-haired human commander appeared again on the screen. Yes. His calm response irritated the council officials around Velkar. You must withdraw, one of them snapped. This is not a fight you can win. The human tilted his head slightly. That depends. On what? The commander's eyes shifted briefly toward the tactical display. On how predictable the Vorath are. Across the void, the Dominion fleet accelerated. Velkar had studied their tactics before. They favored overwhelming forward assaults. Heavy ships would pin an enemy formation, while boarding craft disabled individual vessels for capture. It was brutal, but effective. The Vorath had conquered 22 star systems using the same doctrine. Velkar zoomed in on the human fleet. 7 escort ships remained in tight formation around the massive Dreadnought. They had not moved, not even slightly. No defensive maneuvers. No dispersal. No attempt to flee. One of the council observers scoffed. "They've frozen." Another shook his head. Fear response? Velkar didn't respond. Something about the human stillness felt intentional. The Vorath fleet crossed the halfway point. Energy weapons began charging across their hulls. Mass drivers rotated into firing alignment. Hundreds of targeting beams painted the small human formation. Velkar held his breath. The Dominion commander spoke again. "This is your final warning." The human commander replied calmly. "Understood." He muted the channel. Then he turned to someone off-screen. "Navigation. Confirm enemy velocity." A younger human officer responded. "Closing at .2 light speed, sir." The commander nodded. "Good." Velkar frowned. "Good?" That was an alarming response. The human continued. "Helm, maintain formation." "Yes, sir." No panic, no shouting. Just quiet efficiency. Velkar felt a strange sensation building in his chest. The humans weren't behaving like prey. The first Vorath volley fired. Space erupted with light. Dozens of particle lances streaked across the void. Velkar expected the humans to scatter. They didn't. Instead, something else happened. The 7 escort ships moved, not away, forward. Each vessel shifted slightly ahead of the Dreadnought. Then their hull plating split open along their sides. Velkar leaned closer. "What are they deploying?" The answer came a second later. Thousands of tiny metallic objects burst from the escort ships. A shimmering cloud expanded outward like silver dust. The incoming Vorath energy beams struck the cloud and bent. Velkar blinked. The beams curved away from the formation, deflecting harmlessly into deep space. The chamber erupted with startled voices. Gravitational lensing. Impossible at that scale. The analyst confirmed it. The drones are generating microgravity wells. The humans had just bent an entire weapons volley around themselves. The Vorath fleet hesitated. Only for a moment. Then they fired again. This time using kinetic weapons. Mass driver slugs screamed across the void. The silver drone cloud shifted. Gravity fields twisted. Most of the projectiles veered off course. A few slipped through. Human point defense cannons intercepted them instantly. Velkar stared in astonishment. The humans had just neutralized an opening barrage from one of the most feared fleets in the quadrant. And they had done it without firing back. The Dominion commander growled across the communication channel. Interesting trick. The Vorath ships spread into a wider attack formation. Carrier vessels launched fighter swarms. Hundreds of small attack craft flooded toward the human fleet. Velkar's crest lowered. Even with defensive drones, that many fighters would overwhelm them. The human commander finally gave a new order. "Escort group." "Yes, sir." "Engage." The 7 human ships accelerated, not away from the fighters, directly into them. Velkar felt his stomach tighten. That was suicidal. But then the escort ships revealed their weapons. Long spinal rail cannons rotated forward. The first ship fired. Thum. A single tungsten projectile punched through 3 Vorath fighters in a straight line. The second ship fired. Thum. Another 3 vanished. Then all 7 ships began firing. Each shot precise. Each projectile devastating. Within seconds, the battlefield filled with drifting debris. But the fighters kept coming. Too many. Velkar's concern returned. Even perfect accuracy couldn't stop hundreds. The human commander spoke again. "Escort group." Phase 2. The 7 ships suddenly split formation. each one releasing another cloud of objects. Velkar assumed they were more gravity drones. He was wrong. These drones ignited. Tiny engines flared. The swarm shot forward like a storm of glowing sparks. One of the analysts gasped. Autonomous interceptors. The drones slammed into the incoming fighters, not with explosions, with surgical precision. Each drone carried a microscopic cutting field. Fighters fell apart mid-flight. Within 30 seconds, the Vorath attack wave was gone. Completely gone. Velkar's mind struggled to process what he had just witnessed. 7 ships had destroyed an entire fighter wing, effortlessly, and they still hadn't used the Dreadnought. The Dominion fleet slowed. For the first time since their arrival, their commander spoke again. This time his voice carried a hint of curiosity. "You are more capable than expected." The human commander nodded politely. "Thank you," the Vorath growled. "You will still lose." The human tilted his head slightly. "Possibly." Velkar felt his frustration rising. Why were the humans still holding back? The Dreadnought had not fired a single weapon. Not one. It simply hovered behind the escort ships like an unmoving mountain. The Dominion fleet reorganized. Heavy cruisers moved forward. Large mass driver cannons aligned toward the human formation. This would be the real attack. Velkar whispered quietly. Now they'll have to use the Dreadnought. But the human commander gave a different order. "Escort group." "Yes, sir." "Fall back." The 7 ships returned to formation around the Dreadnought. Velkar frowned. Why retreat now? The Vorath fleet accelerated again. Dozens of cruisers charging. Mass drivers glowing white-hot. Velkar glanced at the human commander. The man leaned calmly against his console. Then he spoke one final command. "Dreadnought control." A new voice answered. "Ready?" The commander exhaled softly. "Let's remind them why we built you." Velkar's eyes snapped back to the tactical display. For the first time, the TN Aegis Eternal moved. Its enormous hull rotated slowly, and the massive cylindrical launch systems along its spine began to open. Hundreds of armored doors sliding apart. Velkar's breath caught. Inside each launch tube was something long, sleek, deadly. Missiles, but not ordinary missiles. The analyst whispered the mass reading. Each one is the size of a cruiser. Velkar's heart pounded. Cruiser-sized missiles? The human commander spoke calmly. "Dominion fleet." His voice echoed across open space. "You have violated Accord territory." A pause. "You are now subject to defensive response protocol." The Vorath commander laughed. "A single ship cannot stop a Dominion fleet." The human commander nodded slightly. "You're right," Velkar frowned. Then the human finished the sentence. "That's why we brought several thousand missiles." Velkar's eyes widened. The Dreadnought's launch tubes lit up, and the void behind the human fleet erupted into a storm of fire. Thousands of massive kinetic missiles blasted into space, each one accelerating toward the Vorath armada. The Dominion commander's laughter vanished instantly. Velkar stared in disbelief, because the missiles weren't slowing. They were accelerating past anything he had ever seen. The analyst shouted, "Velocity approaching 0.6 light speed." Velkar felt his blood run cold. At that speed, those weren't missiles. They were extinction events, and the Vorath fleet was directly in their path. The first Vorath cruiser exploded before anyone realized the missiles had arrived. There was no impact flash, no warning flare, just sudden absence. One moment the cruiser existed on the tactical display-thick armored hull, mass drivers charging, fighters launching. The next moment it was gone. Not destroyed in the traditional sense, erased. Inside the Thrissian Assembly Observation Chamber, Velkar Ithrin stared in stunned silence as the sensors struggled to process what had happened. The analyst spoke slowly. "Direct kinetic impact." Velkar swallowed. "At that velocity, how much energy?" The analyst hesitated, then whispered the number. equivalent to a large asteroid strike per missile. Velkar felt his crest flatten in shock, and there were thousands of them. Across the void, the Vorath fleet reacted instantly. Defensive flak batteries erupted. Point defense cannons filled space with plasma bursts. Missile interceptors launched in desperate waves. But the human projectiles weren't behaving like missiles. They split apart. Each large cylinder broke open mid-flight, releasing dozens of smaller kinetic darts. Velkar's eyes widened. Submunition dispersal. The analyst nodded grimly. Each missile carries 40 penetrators. Velkar did the math in his head. 3,000 missiles, 40 submunitions each, 120,000 kinetic strikes, moving at over half the speed of light. The Vorath fleet suddenly found itself in the middle of a storm that no defense system had ever been designed to stop. The first wave hit. 3 Dominion cruisers shattered instantly. Their hulls simply couldn't withstand the impact energy. Armor meant to stop energy weapons vaporized like mist. Fragments spun across space in glowing arcs. Then the second wave arrived. A carrier vessel took 2 hits simultaneously. Its entire midsection collapsed inward. Fighters tumbled from its broken launch bays like sparks from a dying fire. Inside the observation chamber, someone whispered, "By the stars?" Velkar could barely breathe. The human Dreadnought had fired a single volley, and the Vorath fleet was already disintegrating. But the missiles kept coming. Hundreds streaked past the first destroyed ships and continued deeper into the formation. Some detonated near the Vorath flagship. The shock waves alone tore apart several escort vessels. Velkar watched the tactical display as red icons began vanishing faster and faster. 5 ships, 10, 20, gone. Each destruction happened so quickly that the Dominion fleet barely had time to react. The Vorath commander finally screamed across open space, "All ships scatter!" But it was too late. The missiles had been designed for predictive targeting. Human guidance systems calculated escape vectors faster than any Vorath computer. Every evasive maneuver simply placed another ship directly in the path of a kinetic dart. Velkar felt the weight of terrible realization. This wasn't just powerful technology. This was strategic inevitability. The humans had designed a weapon that turned an enemy's movements against them. The human commander watched the battle from the bridge of the TNS Resolve. His expression remained solemn, not triumphant, not excited, just focused. An officer reported calmly, "First volley impact confirmed. Dominion fleet losses at 32%. Another officer spoke. "Second missile wave approaching." The commander nodded. "Maintain targeting priority on heavy cruisers." "Yes, sir." Velkar listened to the exchange through the open channel. There was no celebration, no battle cries, just quiet coordination. It felt less like combat and more like engineering. Outside, the second wave hit. 6 Vorath cruisers vanished within seconds. A boarding platform attempted to retreat into hyperspace. A kinetic dart struck its warp drive mid-jump. The resulting explosion tore apart 3 nearby ships. The Dominion fleet began collapsing into chaos. Velkar had studied hundreds of battles across the galaxy. He had never seen one end this quickly. The Vorath had arrived with overwhelming force. Now they were simply trying to survive. The Dominion flagship broadcast a desperate signal. "Human vessels, cease fire." The message carried none of the earlier arrogance, only fear. Velkar glanced toward the human commander. The man raised a hand. "Hold missile launch." The officers froze. "Sir?" The commander repeated the order. "Hold." The next volley remained inside the Dreadnought's launch tubes. Velkar blinked in surprise. The Vorath fleet was crippled. Another strike would annihilate them completely. Why stop now? The Dominion commander spoke again. "We surrender this engagement." The words sounded unnatural, coming from a Vorath throat. "We will withdraw." Velkar waited for the human commander's response. A long silence filled the channel. Finally, the human spoke. "Dominion fleet, power down your weapons." A pause. "And leave Accord territory immediately." The Vorath commander hesitated, perhaps calculating whether the humans were bluffing. The human commander leaned slightly closer to the camera. "We still have 2,000 missiles remaining." The Vorath hesitation ended instantly. One by one, the surviving ships powered down their weapons. Warp drives began charging. Velkar exhaled slowly. The battle was over. Or so he thought. Suddenly the analyst shouted, "New warp signatures." Velkar spun toward the tactical display. 3 enormous ships tore out of hyperspace behind the Vorath fleet. Even larger than the cruisers. Dark, jagged. He recognized them immediately. Vorath War Titans. Mobile siege platforms. Each one capable of leveling a planetary surface. Velkar's voice dropped. They were waiting in reserve. The Dominion commander's voice returned, this time filled with savage pride. "You should have destroyed us when you had the chance, humans." The War Titans opened their weapon arrays. Massive spinal cannons glowing with devastating energy. Velkar felt dread creeping into his thoughts. Even the human Dreadnought might struggle against 3 Titans. The human commander looked at the tactical display. Then he sighed, not in fear, in disappointment. "Of course," he murmured. An officer glanced at him. "Sir?" The commander turned slightly. "Signal the Dreadnought." "Yes, sir." "What message?" The commander's voice grew very quiet. "Authorization for protocol last light." Velkar's heart skipped. The Dreadnought responded instantly. Authorization accepted. Then its reactor output began climbing again. Not gradually this time. Violently. Power readings spiked beyond anything the sensors could safely measure. The entire observation chamber filled with warning alarms. The analyst shouted. Energy output exceeding safe thresholds. Velkar stared at the Dreadnought in horror. "What are they doing?" The answer came from the human commander himself. He looked directly into the camera. "We built the missiles to stop fleets." A pause. "But the Dreadnought," his eyes shifted toward the incoming War Titans, "was built to stop empires." Outside the viewport, the TNS Aegis Eternal began unfolding something along its central spine. A structure so enormous that it stretched nearly the entire length of the ship. Velkar felt his blood turn cold, because it wasn't a missile launcher. It wasn't a cannon. It was something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. And when the first surge of energy ran through it, the nearby stars themselves flickered. For a moment, every sensor in the Thrissian assembly spire went blind. Not malfunctioning. Overwhelmed. The power surge erupting from the TNS Aegis Eternal flooded detection systems with so much energy that the instruments had no scale capable of measuring it. Inside the observation chamber, alarms screamed in overlapping tones. Analysts rushed to recalibrate their consoles. Velkar Ithrin gripped the railing of the viewing platform, his eyes locked on the projection of the human Dreadnought. The structure unfolding along its spine now stretched like a colossal spear of machinery segments sliding outward, locking into place with mechanical precision. It looked less like a weapon, and more like an astronomical instrument. The analyst closest to Velkar whispered in disbelief. "That's not a cannon." Velkar nodded slowly. "No." He could see it now. The geometry. The rotating rings. The focusing lattice stretching across the Dreadnought's dorsal frame. This is something else. Across the void, the 3 Vorath War Titans advanced. They were monstrous vessels, each nearly 5 kilometers long, armored with layers of neutron plating, designed to survive planetary bombardment. The Dominion commander's voice returned across the communication channel, filled with venom. "You think one ship will frighten us?" Behind him, the Titans began charging their spinal cannons, weapons capable of firing beams that could melt continents. Velkar felt a familiar dread rising. If those weapons fired simultaneously, the human fleet, even the Dreadnought, would be in danger. But the human commander did not look concerned. On the bridge of the TNS Resolve, he simply folded his arms and watched. Energy synchronization complete. A voice from the Dreadnought reported. "Good," the commander replied quietly. Velkar leaned closer to the display. "What are they synchronizing?" The answer came seconds later. The enormous structure along the Dreadnought's spine began to glow. Not with weapon energy, but with gravitational distortion. Velkar's eyes widened. "That's impossible." The analyst beside him stared at the readings. "They're generating a controlled gravity field." Velkar shook his head. No ship can project gravity at that scale, yet the evidence was unmistakable. The massive rings along the Dreadnought rotated slowly. Space itself began to bend around them. Stars behind the ship warped into curved streaks of light. The entire Dreadnought appeared to sit at the center of a slowly forming gravitational well. Velkar whispered the terrifying conclusion. "They're building a gravitational lens." Across the void, the Vorath War Titans opened fire. 3 colossal energy beams erupted toward the human fleet. Planet-killer weapons. Velkar braced himself for devastation. But the beams never reached their target. As the energy streams approached the Dreadnought, the gravitational field bent them. The beams curved like rivers of light, pulled by an invisible tide. They arced around the human fleet and collided with one of the Vorath Titans. The explosion lit the entire battlefield. The Titan's shields shattered instantly. Its forward armor melted like wax beneath its own redirected weapon. The ship broke apart in a silent eruption of plasma. Inside the observation chamber, someone gasped. They just redirected the attack. Velkar felt a chill run through him. The humans had turned the enemy's greatest weapon against them. The remaining 2 war titans hesitated. For the first time since their arrival, their commanders clearly struggled to understand what had just happened. The human commander spoke calmly across the channel. "Dominion fleet." A pause. "You should leave," the Vorath commander snarled. "You think a trick will stop us?" Both remaining titans fired again, this time staggering their shots, attempting to overwhelm the gravitational lens. But the Dreadnought adjusted instantly. The rotating rings shifted alignment. Gravity wells pulsed outward. The beams twisted mid-flight and slammed into the second Titan. Its shields collapsed under the redirected energy. The beam carved through the ship's reactor core. The Titan detonated in a silent bloom of white fire. Velkar stared at the display in awe. 2 war titans destroyed, without the humans firing a single conventional shot. The final Titan attempted to retreat, warp engines flaring as it tried to escape the battlefield. But the Dreadnought's gravitational field expanded. Velkar watched the readings climb. "They're increasing the lensing radius." The analyst nodded, voice shaking. "They're trapping the Titan inside the gravity well." The fleeing warship struggled against the invisible pull, warp drives flickering unstable. The human commander gave one final order. "Dreadnought control." "Yes, sir." "Focus the lens." The enormous rings along the Dreadnought's spine rotated into perfect alignment. For a moment, the stars behind them compressed into a brilliant point of light. Then the Dreadnought fired. Not a beam, not a missile. A column of concentrated starlight. Velkar's breath caught. The gravitational lens had gathered light from the surrounding stars and focused it into a single devastating ray. The beam struck the final Titan. Its armor vaporized instantly. The ship's massive structure disintegrated into expanding clouds of molten metal. Within seconds, nothing remained. Silence returned to the battlefield. The surviving Vorath ships had already fled, their warp signatures fading into distant space. The human Dreadnought slowly powered down. The massive lensing rings folded back into the hull, as if the weapon had never existed. Inside the observation chamber, no one spoke for several long seconds. Velkar finally exhaled. "Remarkable," He opened the communication channel again. Human command. The gray-haired commander appeared on screen. Yes, Archivist? Velkar struggled to find the right words. You could have destroyed the Dominion fleet entirely. The human nodded. Yes. Why didn't you? The commander leaned back slightly. For the first time, there was a hint of something deeper in his expression. Not pride, not satisfaction. Something older. We built the Dreadnought because we know what war does. He paused. We try not to make it worse than it already is. Velkar studied the man carefully. The humans had just demonstrated a weapon capable of defeating an entire armada. Yet they had shown restraint. A strange combination. Terrible power. And deliberate mercy. The commander spoke again. Archivist Ithrin, yes? Is the Accord evaluation complete? Velkar glanced at the shattered remnants of the Vorith fleet drifting across the tactical display. He nodded slowly. Yes. The human smiled faintly. Good. Then the transmission ended. But Velkar couldn't stop staring at the Dreadnought. The Aegis Eternal. A ship capable of bending light, redirecting planetary weapons, and reshaping gravity itself. The galaxy had ignored humanity's fleet. Because it looked small, primitive, unimpressive. Now Velkar understood the truth. Those 7 escort ships had never been meant to intimidate anyone. They had been meant to hide the one thing humanity hoped it would never have to use. And Velkar suspected the humans had many more ships like it. Perhaps not thousands, perhaps not even dozens. But enough. Enough to make every empire in the galaxy reconsider what they thought they knew about Earth. He turned toward the council officials. I believe, Velkar said quietly, we underestimated them. But Velkar did not yet know the most important truth about humanity, and he would learn it very soon. Because Earth had not built the Dreadnought merely to win wars. They had built it for something far more dangerous. To make sure wars ended. The battlefield was quiet again. Where moments earlier more than 100 warships had fought for dominance, now only fragments drifted slowly through the black. Broken Vorith hull plates, cooling debris, silent clouds of ionized metal. And at the center of it all, unmoving and immense, the human Dreadnought TN's Aegis Eternal waited like a mountain carved from starlight. Inside the Thrissian Assembly orbital spire, no one spoke for several minutes. Archivist Velkar Ithrin simply watched the tactical display. The numbers continued updating. Vorith losses, catastrophic. Human losses, 0. He had witnessed thousands of military engagements throughout his career as an archivist of galactic history. Battles between ancient empires, clashes of superweapons, wars that had lasted centuries. But this had been something different. Not just victory, control. Humanity had not fought desperately to survive. They had conducted the battle like a carefully planned equation. Velkar finally broke the silence. Send a system-wide broadcast. A council official blinked. What message? Velkar looked once more at the quiet human fleet. Inform the Galactic Accord that the human evaluation has concluded. He paused. And update their classification. The official hesitated. To what level? Velkar answered slowly. Strategic civilization. Outside the viewport, the 7 escort ships began moving again. The tight defensive formation relaxed slightly as the immediate threat faded. Maintenance drones emerged from their hulls, small robotic units drifting through the debris field. The analysts frowned. What are they doing? Velkar zoomed the sensors closer. The drones were collecting something, not weapons, not technology. Bodies, Vorith bodies. The analysts exchanged confused looks. Why would they retrieve enemy casualties? Velkar opened the human communication channel again. Human command. The gray-haired commander reappeared on screen. Yes, Archivist? Velkar gestured toward the drone activity. Your machines are collecting Dominion personnel. The commander nodded. Yes. Velkar tilted his head slightly. For interrogation, the human shook his head. For burial, the observation chamber went completely silent. Velkar felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. You are honoring the dead of an enemy fleet. The human commander's voice softened slightly. War is ugly enough without forgetting they were people. Velkar studied the human carefully. A species capable of building weapons that bent starlight itself, yet still pausing to recover the fallen of an enemy who had come to enslave them. The contradiction was almost impossible to process. But it was also deeply fascinating. Another transmission arrived, this time from the Galactic Accord Defense Command. Their fleet had finally reached the edge of the system. Too late, their commander's voice filled the chamber. Archivist Ithrin, we detected the battle. Situation report. Velkar glanced again at the tactical display, then answered calmly. The threat has been neutralized. A pause. By whom? Velkar looked out toward the silent human dreadnought. By the new species you asked us to evaluate. There was a long silence on the channel. Then the defense commander spoke again. Understood. Across the void, the Aegis Eternal began powering down, its massive hull dimmed. The gravitational lensing systems folded completely back into armored compartments. Once again, it looked less like a terrifying weapon and more like a silent guardian. Velkar found himself wondering how many more ships like it existed. 1? 5? 20? The thought sent a quiet ripple through the chamber. If humanity could build even a handful of dreadnoughts with that level of capability, the balance of power across the entire spiral arm would change. Not overnight, but inevitably. Velkar reopened the channel one final time. Human command. The gray-haired commander appeared again. Yes, Archivist? Velkar hesitated. Archivists were supposed to observe history, not participate in it, but he felt compelled to ask the question anyway. Why did you reveal the dreadnought? The human leaned back slightly. We didn't plan to. Velkar frowned. Then why build it at all? The commander looked toward the enormous warship outside his viewport. For a moment, his expression grew distant. Because we know what happens when no one can stop the worst people in the room. Velkar thought about the Vorath Dominion, about the thousands of civilizations they had conquered, the billions of lives lost across centuries of expansion. Then he thought about the human fleet. 7 escorts. 1 hidden dreadnought. Quiet, patient, prepared. The commander continued. Earth spent most of its history fighting itself. A pause. Eventually we realized something. Velkar waited. The human's voice grew very calm. Peace only lasts when someone is strong enough to protect it. Several hours later, the human fleet prepared to depart. Their warp drives warmed slowly. Maintenance drones returned to their ships. The debris field had been cleared of the dead. Velkar stood at the observation window as the dreadnought rotated slightly. For the first time, he noticed something carved deep into the armor along its bow. Human words. He ran a translation. The phrase appeared on his console. Speak softly, and carry a very large shield. Velkar tilted his head. A strange saying, but suddenly it made perfect sense. The humans had not built the dreadnought to conquer the galaxy. They had built it to stand between the galaxy and the monsters within it. The human commander transmitted one final message to the assembly. Archivist Ithrin. Yes? We look forward to working with the Accord. Velkar nodded slowly. So do we. The human smiled faintly. Then the transmission ended. One by one, the human ships vanished into hyperspace. The escorts first, then the enormous Aegis Eternal, slipping silently into the folds of space. And just like that, the battlefield was empty again. Later that cycle, Velkar finalized the official historical entry. First contact evaluation. Humanity? His claws hovered briefly over the console. Then he began typing. Initial assessment. Minor emerging civilization. He paused, then deleted the line. Instead, he wrote something else. Revised assessment. Humanity is not the strongest species in the galaxy, but they may become the most dangerous enemy any tyrant could ever make. Elcar leaned back. Outside the observation window, the stars shimmered quietly. Somewhere far away, the human fleet was returning home, back to a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star. A world the galaxy had once ignored. Now every empire would know its name. And more importantly, they would remember the lesson humanity had just taught them. Never underestimate the quiet species, especially the one that builds dreadnoughts, not to conquer the stars, but to defend them.